Welcome to the very first episode of Fort Worth Innovates, a show about innovation, research, entrepreneurship, and startups in Panther City. My name is Cameron Cushman, and I'm the host of this podcast that will bring you the stories of the innovators, entrepreneurs, and visionaries that are putting our city on the map as a leader in innovation. With the help of the Fort Worth-Tarrant County Innovation Partnership, we are bringing you stories of innovation in our hometown. My guest today is the mayor of Fort Worth, who just started her third two-year term, Mattie Parker. Mayor Parker was first elected to lead the nation's now 11th largest city in 2021. Her priorities in office focus on key efforts and community partnerships to bolster Fort Worth's economic development, improve public safety, expand access to education and workforce opportunities, and preserve the city's rich heritage with a determination to leave things better than she found them. As the leader of one of the nation's fastest-growing cities, Mayor Parker has centered her attention on improving the quality of life for every Fort Worth resident. Mayor Parker, welcome to the very first episode of the Fort Worth Innovates podcast.
Thanks, Cameron, for having me. Really appreciate it.
All right, so I want to start by asking you about your version of the story about how Texas A&M came to Fort Worth. You were not mayor at the time, but I know you were involved and you kind of had an idea of what was going on as they began to explore moving into North Texas. Can you tell us your version of how the Fort Worth A&M campus got started?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. At the time when Texas A&M and Wesleyan created their merger acquisition relationship, ironically, I was actually in law school at Texas Wesleyan, set to graduate, and I did actually graduate as the last graduating class of Texas Wesleyan School of Law before it became Texas A&M. My husband, David, who's, as you well know, a good Aggie, jokes that I graduated early in order to avoid being an Aggie, which is not true at all. I was just really ready to get out of law school. But at the time, I worked for Congressman Granger and got to have a front row seat to everything that was transpiring in the acquisition. And it was obvious at the time that not only was this an opportunity for Texas Wesleyan, but this was also an opportunity for Texas A&M to have a real footprint in the city of Fort Worth and in North Texas. And fast forward to COVID, which was incredibly difficult for all the reasons we don't need to rehash today, right? And Mayor Price at the time was trying to navigate as a large city mayor at a very uncertain time, and very quickly realized, as difficult as the times were at the moment with COVID, especially from a clinical standpoint and trying to save lives and work with hospital systems, we were also needing to refocus on what does it look like after the pandemic and COVID. And I don't have to tell you this, economically, things were really uncertain, not just in Fort Worth and Texas, but across the United States. And we wanted to come back stronger. And obviously, she created Fort Worth Now and asked people like John Goff and Elaine Agather to lead that effort. And John deserves so much credit of immediately recognizing we have to meet this moment. We have to understand the sense of urgency, but also think about how to build the city even better after the pandemic was over. And it was his relationship to real estate and development and all of his success that quickly realized we have a jewel in downtown Fort Worth, which was a growing, successful law school that only has exceeded expectations, fastest growing, successful law school in the nation's history, really, in terms of growth from tier 3 to tier 1, constantly battling to go up in ranking and sitting in downtown Fort Worth. And so with all of that energy, and then the refocus from John, who said, I want to dedicate my time pro bono to making this the most successful higher education endeavor in Fort Worth, outside, of course, of our flagship university in TCU. And from a real estate perspective, he saw it immediately. And then it didn't take long for synergies between John Sharp to happen, our chancellor of A&M at the time, and Bobby Adier, of course, his vision as dean of the law school. All of those things started to kind of marry together. But they also needed buy-in and a real focus from the city of Fort Worth that this was indeed the right thing to pursue. And obviously, Betsy did that in spades and made her safe available in the middle of the pandemic to make sure that they had the right support from Fort Worth and then ultimately from Tarrant County. And lucky for us, that's continued with the transition of leadership between Mayor Price and myself. And of course, the transition of leadership at Tarrant County. We've all been committed to recognizing that this school, this university system that is so well respected across the globe, to have them investing in Fort Worth, now, of course, we'll get into that well beyond the law school. That's really the story. And as I've joked many times over, Cameron, I know you're a strong Aggie, that when it's all said and done, I think it will say Texas A&M presents downtown Fort Worth because they continue to make investments and dedicate really incredibly innovative opportunities, not just for their students and future students, but really for business and industry, which is part of why this partnership exists.
Yeah, and it's become a running joke, but people keep calling this the game changer. Right? I think John Goff was the first one that said that A&M coming to Fort Worth was a game changer. And part of the reason is because Texas A&M is a huge system that's all over the state, but didn't really have much of a presence in Fort Worth until they bought the law school, and then it was just a law school. Now this is kind of ramping up to the next level. So Texas A&M is going to bring several of their schools, faculty, and programs to Fort Worth as they build out this new campus in southeast downtown. What are the programs that you know about, and what are the ones that get you most excited?
Yeah, so I could name several different programs. I think what I have to mention first, I know that some of your listeners probably already know this, but one distinction I would give the leadership at Texas A&M immediately was we're not just doing this autonomously by ourselves with all of our deans of schools on what we think we want to bring to North Texas and Fort Worth. They immediately started meeting with business leaders all across Tarrant County, really across North Texas, to meet the need that they know exists today and into the future. So, pillars of work that will be important, of course, between healthcare, defense, advanced manufacturing, food science, all of those things are included in that second innovation building that they're working toward right now. And that they should be commended, right? That takes a tremendous amount of effort, and they didn't have to do that, Cameron. Texas A&M could have said, "Hey, we're the big dogs, and we're coming to town, and this is what we're going to do." But they wanted this to be integrated into the city of Fort Worth and Tarrant County, and because of that, we're incredibly thankful. I would say a few things that stick out. One in particular really had happened before the decision to make investments in Fort Worth is the research around FDA, Food and Drug Administration, and our food pyramid in the US, and how to make sure that all Americans have access to the latest and most updated information about what is healthy on their plate every single day. And Texas A&M is incredibly proud to have received that very large research grant, and they want it to be headquartered in the city of Fort Worth, which is an incredibly exciting opportunity for our city because it's not just about us or Texans. It's really about a refocus on food science and health of America moving forward. And A&M should be commended for that. And aren't we fortunate that they want that to be headquartered here in the city of Fort Worth? The second, I would tell you, and we've seen this play out as important and successful and fortunate for us many times over, is the Texas Department of Emergency Management that is currently led by Nim Kidd. As a reminder, Governor Abbott and John Sharp created this partnership. There was already an agency for Department of Emergency Management through DPS. They removed it from DPS and through a partnership with A&M, nested that very critical life-saving agency in Texas A&M University, and it has been incredibly impactful and very successful now as a model across the country. And TDEM really will be headquartered here in the city of Fort Worth. And it's been a really trying summer here in Texas, and obviously, most notably, the floods on July 4th. But we have some of the very best professionals in emergency management in the entire country. And to know that they're going to be headquartered here in Fort Worth at that Texas A&M campus is tremendous. A side note story I'll give you, if you remember when the hotel blew up downtown, the Sandman, and I was actually seated in this seat when the explosion happened here at Fort Worth City Hall. And we immediately knew something was quite serious because the level of attention downtown. I immediately got a phone call from Chief Noakes, who happened to have been at Old City Hall at the time, our police chief. And so immediately I knew within 3 to 5 minutes, we have a very serious situation downtown Fort Worth. Well, right after Chief Noakes called me, Nim Kidd called, and he said, "Hey, I'm actually downtown Fort Worth for meetings," because at the time they had temporary office space already in downtown, preparing for their move. And so I only tell you this long story because he immediately activated all his resources from downtown Fort Worth because he was here in our city. and just the best and brightest men and women that are willing to be public servants and first responders that will be headquartered at A&M. And then last, and maybe that gets the most attention and most news, of course, is all of the focus in Texas around film and television production and the new investments the state of Texas has agreed to make through the Texas Moving Industry Industry Fund. But people don't realize is we're also refocused across the state and what higher education training looks like. And Texas A&M has one of the very best programs in the entire nation. And that visual arts program through film and animation will be in the city of Fort Worth, right here in North Texas, which is quite exciting and really training the next generation of leaders in those industries. And I think the sky's the limit. And honestly, a really smart move on their part to headquarter that division here in Fort Worth.
Wow, so much there. But let me start at the end, which is to say that, I mean, A&M creates a lot of people who go on to work at Pixar and other animation studios because of this program. And it's going to be right here in downtown Fort Worth, plus the video game industry and other things that I just don't think a lot of people realize is already here, but is going to be here in a much bigger way. The other thing I don't think most Fort Worthians realize is this is not just about academia. It's not just about research and faculty and students. These are state agencies that Texas A&M runs on behalf of the state, and they're going to have a presence here in Fort Worth, which I think is just very different than the role that most people think a large university system plays.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And honestly, the topic of obviously your podcast and why you do the work that you're doing alongside the Innovation Partnership is because we do want to generate ideas and be one of the most innovative communities in the country. And we sort of have a responsibility to do that, Cameron, because as one of the fastest growing cities where all these folks are moving, you have all this opportunity. We can't be stuck on the way we've always done things. We have to look to the future. And higher education oftentimes can be that incubator. And again, special thanks to A&M, they also recognize they're only better together with industry leaders and public sector partners. And they keep doing that in spades, which I'm thankful for.
Well, and there's just so much content here that we are excited to tell as we launch this podcast. So you couldn't have teed it up any better for future episodes that we already have in the works. And as long as people keep listening, we're going to keep telling these great stories because there is really so much cool stuff already happening and so much cool stuff on the horizon that we want to be reporting and storytelling from day one. But I want to go back to what you said about real estate. So when you think about the location of where this campus is happening in kind of the southeast quadrant of downtown, this used to be known as Hell's Half Acre, which was a part of town known for its nightlife and as a place where you could find trouble. And since you attended law school in that neighborhood, can you give us your take on how this campus will transform what used to be Hell's Half Acre into the next Kendall Square in Boston, potentially?
Well, it is transformational. It's funny having gone to school there, and I went to night school actually for the first year and a half of law school. So,
So
it
you
is
really got the
remarkable.
nightlife, huh?
Absolutely, yeah. Well, I don't know. It's kind of boring, quite honestly, but uh, I to watch what's happening down. I mean, downtown Fort Worth right now has over $3 billion of development, and a large part of it really is in that
Wow,
south
$3
quadrant.
billion?
$3 billion, yeah, and a lot of it is
Unbelievable.
in that south end of downtown, with between the convention center, phase 1 and phase 2, obviously Texas A&M's campus, and all of that refocus on the south part of our downtown hadn't been happening for really over a decade. And it will transform not just our central business district downtown, but really the entire city to continue to see this level of investment and excitement in a downtown corridor. If you think about across the country, especially post-COVID, post-pandemic, almost every major American city's downtown has suffered tremendously. And we have been incredibly lucky. Yes, we saw some impacts, of course, but our vacancy rates downtown continue to be low. You have the right strategic focus from Downtown Fort Worth Inc. on, returning residents downtown, building multifamily where we can, thinking about transportation, the partnerships between the county and the city, everybody moving in the right direction. And then now you have this focus for A&M. And think about the proximity, not just across Fort Worth, but across North Texas, to be in the center of one of the largest metropolitan regions in the country, soon to be bigger than Chicago. And you're situated, 30 minutes from Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport, which is the third busiest airport in the world and continues to be a complete game changer for all of Texas and North Texas. So the proximity to all of those things and more that we could talk about today make a big difference.
Absolutely, yeah. And there's not going to be a shortage of stories to tell, as I mentioned. So, Mayor, when you look around Fort Worth, there are several areas that are already kind of in place as designated places where innovation happens. We've got the Mobility Innovation Zone up at Alliance, Texas, around Alliance Airport. You have the Medical Innovation District in the near south side where all the hospitals are. What do you think Texas A&M and the Fort Worth and Tarrant County Innovation Partnership can bring to the southeast side of downtown that we don't already have?
Number one is Texas A&M has already become a major convener of ideas and focus. So I think we can't even imagine, honestly, Cameron, where a lot of this will head into the future, just because as you start to see some of the country's greatest thinkers and some of these sectors that they're headquartering here in Fort Worth start to be visionaries here in our city, not just at College Station, but also candidly working with other higher education institutions and other community leaders across Fort Worth. I think the sky really is the limit. I would mention maybe one that we could focus on. I think you and I've talked about it before, but the Mobility Innovation Zone at Hillwood that has focused on transportation innovations that the entire globe is looking at. And I go to their big conference every single year and am blown away by the companies and innovators that come from across the globe to here to the city of Fort Worth, usually staying at the Hotel Drover in the Fort Worth Stockyards, to talk about what innovation and transportation technology looks like. And that's everything from autonomous vehicles, both cargo and passenger, thinking about the future of rail, thinking about the future of air taxis and drone technologies. I could go on, all here in Fort Worth. And the synergies you're seeing between the Mobility Innovation Zone, Hillwood, and Mike Berry and his team, and of course downtown and Texas A&M is already starting and will continue to grow. And then the other one I would mention is the opportunity for urban agriculture. Texas A&M has, because of the FDA research and because of their focus on agriculture as a land-grant agriculture university in the first place, is they recognize that the future is here on what agriculture will look like moving forward. And Fort Worth, of course, wants to be at the center of that. And to have A&M focus on urban agriculture here in the city, we have companies right now that continue to grow and thrive that are thinking about better partnerships here in the city of Fort Worth and more investment because of the emphasis that Texas A&M has here in Fort Worth.
Great. So we've kind of highlighted what's going on downtown. We've highlighted what's going on with Texas A&M moving in a big way and the Fort Worth and Tarrant County Innovation Partnership. But as mayor, you get around the city. Can you highlight a few innovations that you've seen, maybe not in those areas, that have really impressed you? Or is there anything that you think the average Fort Worthian might not know about that would be cool to highlight?
Well, I think one I would have given you that was a secret, and now it's not anymore, of course, is the new Paramount Studios with Taylor Sheridan and 101 Studios. It was announced there at Hillwood. That will now be the largest studio space in the entire state of Texas. And the amount of investment that's refocused here, and it does tie directly to Texas A&M because of the visual arts piece that will be headquartered here in Fort Worth. That will only double the interest, if not more, of other production teams and major labels that want to be here in the city. So, and I'm so proud of that work because, 10 years ago, we started the Fort Worth Film Commission that was a scrappy group of people that wanted us to be known for film and television based on some ingenuity that really was born out of Visit Fort Worth and Jessica Christopherson. And then now it's grown into what it is today with big studio announcements.
It's a pretty big deal. And since I know Taylor's listening, Taylor, come on the show. We'd love to have you give us a tour. We'll show our audience
There you
the
go.
cool
I
stuff
think
that you're building.
that's a good idea.
There
Absolutely.
you
I love
go.
it.
All right, so you are the mayor of the 11th largest city in the country, and you have a huge staff, and they're working on some innovative stuff too. Can you tell us about some innovation that maybe the city staff is working on that may make our city more efficient, more tech savvy, more forward thinking?
So number one I would mention is our Fort Worth lab office, our budget office. I know that doesn't sound exciting, but believe me, it is. If you want to be one of the most well-run, fiscally responsible cities in the country to manage all of this growth, it all has to start with where you manage your money. It's the same way we run our households, right? And so I would say the emphasis we've put between our chief innovation officer and Christiane Simmons, who really focuses that budget office. She has some incredibly talented individuals that work for her, that work with every single department year round. And it's not just about what your budget is, it's also creating efficiencies and cross-departmental work. And so I have to give a shout out to the work that's happening there. And then you also deserve an environment that creates more innovation and a sense of belonging and focus. And I don't have to tell you this because you visited it often. Our old city hall was not cutting it. We had well outgrown the space. We had become inefficient as a city because we had outgrown city hall. We had buildings and rental units all across the city for city staff to be in, and that's no longer the case. I'm so proud of Fort Worth City Hall, which of course was the old Pier 1 building. It is an incredible Class A office building that belongs to every resident here in the city of Fort Worth. We've now been in this office space and opened the chambers just a few, about almost a year ago, and it's been a game changer. And number one is about customer service and making sure our residents have everything available to them, and that their employees that work for the city also can do a great job by working in a building like this, co-locating together with other departments, being able to sell the central library downtown, which was 2 city blocks. Returning that property to tax rolls, you're going to see a world-class development in that space. Of course, repurposing Old City Hall. And sometimes it's small things that sound weird, like we had library staff that were renting space for their headquarters at LeGrand Plaza. We're able to move them into City Hall to co-locate with other places and return those monies back to the general fund. So I really encourage people to come see it. If you haven't been to our 5th floor, development services, we call it our one-stop shop. You can walk in most cases, get your permit or need met for in the same day, meet with water department if you're trying to pay a bill. It is really focused on customer service, which I hope most of our residents can really appreciate.
Yeah, love it. And I tell you, every time I walk into that new city hall, it's like it's too nice to be city hall. It's such a beautiful building and so well
Oh,
done.
good.
And
I'm so glad.
it's nice, but it's not ostentatious. It's nice, but it's still welcoming. And I love the new council chambers that you guys have built there, the kind of addition, which is super cool. So
Well, and I
uh,
hope, and now the connectivity to the trail, which is great.
yeah, that's right. That's right. So, one of the things that's always distinguished Fort Worth from other cities is our ability to work together on public private partnerships. You've already alluded to a few of these, but can you tell us about some public private partnerships that have led to innovation in this city?
Oh, well, I mean, number one, I would probably give you is the Fort Worth Zoo. I mean, think about the success of our world-class zoo. Continues to be almost number one in our hearts, of course, but literally number one on almost every list every single year. And that was the tenacity of Ramona Bass and recognizing this asset could be more, coming to the city of Fort Worth and our Parks Department to create that public-private partnership. And without it, we would not be where we are. Then you have Dickies Arena, another incredibly successful public-private partnership to build this award-winning arena in Fort Worth now in the Cultural District that hosts everything from Paul McCartney to Leon Bridges to Post Malone, right? You have it all in that beautiful building. And of course, also home to our annual Fort Worth Stock Show and Rodeo. Again, wouldn't have happened. Most recently was probably the Botanic Gardens, which was a public-private partnership between us and Brit to create additional resources and investment in the Botanic Gardens, which has been immensely successful. And we do those better than anybody, Cameron. I think as we put the right people at the table and to recognize, which is what this partnership is about, that we're stronger in this together. Let's layer intelligence, money, investment, and time and commitment. And those public-private partnerships really do play out as successful.
Love that. So we've talked a lot about positives. There's a lot of cool stuff going on, but obviously a city's going to have challenges. What do you think are the biggest challenges that are facing Fort Worth when it comes to innovation, and how do you think we can work together to solve those?
Well, number one, I think podcasts like this one, it may seem cliche, but let's be honest, almost every American now has a podcast or two they listen to regularly, right? It's how they get their news and information. It's how you relax, unplug. It's much easier to multitask, right? Whether I'm cooking dinner or driving, I throw on a podcast that I trust and appreciate listening to. And so number one, it just starts with communication and an ability to get your message out. And I say this a lot, and I really do believe it. If you are really in my circle, I think you would believe me. Is that I do not know how to get past the toxicity and the noise. I actually think disagreement and wrestling with problems is very healthy, but I don't think where we are today in this country is healthy. And most people probably agree with me unless you're just maniacal and enjoy the fighting. I don't know. But in Fort Worth, we have usually been able to, even on our most difficult times, been able to kind of rise above, block out the noise, focus on what Fort Worth residents need and hear from them directly and solve problems. I'm still absolutely optimistic. Even in the most difficult times, we can get back to that. And I appreciate the opportunity to kind of have forums like this one where, yes, you're talking on specific issues, but you also create a forum for people that care about this community and are excited about our future to have a place to plug in and learn from each other. And you're going to have guests on this program that will be folks that maybe across Fort Worth they'd ever got to meet or hear from, and it may give them ideas and maybe ways for them to plug in the future. So I do think that this type of communication tool can be really useful.
Love it. Well, thank you. And that's exactly why we're doing this podcast, is to continue
Good.
to tell these stories, because you never know what slant the media is going to take. You never know what social media is going to say. And to hear what's going on in Fort Worth directly from the mayor of the city means a lot. And it's a lot harder to sort of misconstrue messages when it's you talking in a format like this. So thank you for being our very first guest and for setting the tone,
Sure.
because I do think that's important. And if we're gonna solve tough problems, and I'll quote my former boss, Mr. Kaufman, on this, he said, if we're gonna solve the toughest problems, we've got to work together. And we can't work together if we're all just yelling at each other or tearing each other down on social media or whatever that may look like. So I love that. And I think that's 100% right.
Well, and let's be honest, 85, 90% of Americans do that every day.
Correct.
Right.
Absolutely.
And there are 10% that are loud and enjoys cable news and Facebook posts, but that is not the majority of people. And so
Agreed.
I'm not advocating to ignore that 10%, but I do think you have to take it with a grain of salt and focus on the majority and try to glean and learn and be humble, right? And take constructive feedback and criticism and understand that, at least for me, I'm in a public service position and that's my responsibility. But focus on the good, which obviously I hope this is really a part of your programming on this podcast.
Well, and innovation solves problems, right? At the end of the day, people complain
Yes.
about problems. Well, let's use innovation, technology, entrepreneurship, all those tools that we in the United States are really good at to solve problems. And I hope we can highlight some of those problems that are going to be solved on this show
Yes.
as well. So, speaking of problems, can you tell us about something on the horizon that we can expect to see in the near future? Some innovative solution maybe that's coming either out of the city or from the private sector? Obviously, don't betray any confidences, but we'd love to hear maybe your vision for something that's going to be cool.
So, this is airing at a perfect timing. Obviously, we're talking, and we just announced a new police chief here in the city of Fort Worth, Eddie Garcia, who was the police chief in Dallas. And I think it's applicable here to our conversation around partnership and innovation because the bedrock of any city has to be public safety. People have to feel safe in their homes. They have to feel safe they can build businesses. You can't innovate and make investment and do capital calls if your city is not a safe place to live and make investments in. And so, one thing I was incredibly excited about Chief Garcia's leadership and coming to Fort Worth is he talks a lot about that. What does it look like to integrate policing in a way that it never has been before? And importantly, using technology and innovation partnership. It is too early to tell, but I would be very thrilled and not surprised at all if Chief Garcia and his team are constantly finding new ways, whether it's through technology partnerships that exist today or will exist in the future. And importantly, working with higher education on what does the future of public safety look like today. And I think that just kind of brings it home for me as your mayor. Yes, I get to focus on all these fun things every single day as your mayor. But honestly, 90% of what I do is the brass tacks of running the city. And it really does focus on public safety. So it has to start with leadership. You have to have the right people that you're excited to rally around. And I think we're fully confident Chief Garcia is able to do that for Fort Worth, and it's fun to have him around in our city.
Yeah, and coming up with new solutions, starting a
Yeah,
company, bringing new research to market, it's hard enough. There's enough stacked
yeah.
against you. And if you don't feel safe, if you don't feel comfortable, if you don't, all the things that you just mentioned, it's going to make it a whole lot harder.
I'm not one of those people that wants to belittle other communities that have suffered through difficult times, especially post-COVID. We can name them all here. That's not necessary. But it's no secret that businesses are people, and people are voting with their feet to live in communities like Fort Worth that are safe and well run. And I would be a terrible mayor if that was not my number one priority, because none of this other stuff happens if we're not focused and have our eye on the ball. And you also have to put people in those places, the right leaders at the right time. And the transition, obviously, from Chief Noakes is difficult, right? And you had a great leader there that people, including business leaders, had great relationships with. And Chief Garcia can fill those shoes and use his experience in other communities to do the same here.
Absolutely, yeah. So speaking of people starting businesses, entrepreneurs, innovators, what advice would you give them as they try to operate and start and bring new innovations to market in Fort Worth?
Well, this is a little selfish, but I would say this. For business, we have a small business in our family. My husband has built from the ground up. And watching him, be scrappy and have to start from scratch, you you do have your head down. You're grinding on every single day, right? But at least in Fort Worth, and I feel this way about my administration as your mayor and our city management team. Whoever is in these positions in the future will continue and will make sure that torch continues. Is reach out to those that you want to tell your story. You want them to be advocates for you. If you have problems, maybe it's bureaucratic red tape. Maybe it's I need office space. I don't know this banker, this capital call, or hey, Mattie, I just want you to know that this restaurant is opening. This is my dream that I'm building. Will you talk about it more in the public eye? Or, hey, I'm working with VC out of Boston. They've never done an investment in Fort Worth. We just wanted the mayor to know about it. I can't know everything, nor can those around me, nor can the Economic Development Partnership or other leaders in entrepreneurship. Just find ways to reach out. And it's fortunate and unfortunate. I'm not hard to find. And we want to know your story. And that seems so simple, but please, maybe that's one thing we can generate off of this, Cameron, is you have entrepreneurs in every single sector that blow my mind every day when I get to meet people that are doing these amazing creative things and they're headquartered here in Fort Worth and they're attracting talent to our city. And I would love nothing more than to know their story a bit better and be a big champion for them and be able to say, whether it's in a television interview or just my fellow council colleagues, hey, have you gone down the street here and seen this place? It's pretty amazing. And I hope that helps their business long term, and it certainly makes them feel like they belong in this community.
Well, you took the words right out of my mouth. What I always say is if you don't know who the entrepreneurs are that are operating in your own hometown, then you don't know how to help them. And so get to know them, right? Take that coffee, go to their shop, interact with them, ask them what you can do to help them, ask them what they need. It's really hard to do what they do. And even if you just give them a pat on the back and encourage them, that's huge. So Mayor Parker, what innovation are you most excited about in Fort Worth?
Well, I could name several, Cameron, but Fort Worth is still well known as sort of an aviation capital of the United States in so many ways. And I firmly believe we would never be where we are today as a city, as a region, without the success of Dallas Fort Worth International Airport. As I mentioned earlier, it's pretty mind blowing that it's the third busiest in the world. But leadership, both past and present, recognize we have to continually innovate, push forward, and be one of the best airports in the entire world. And just with the most recent announcement, this year actually, of a $4 billion investment and partnership between American Airlines and DFW Airport for Terminal F. Isn't that mind blowing, right? That is happening today, under construction, focused on the future. And this is a global economy now. And because of DFW Airport, you can be anywhere almost in the world on a direct flight, same day. So think about the opportunity for commerce. Think about the opportunity for entrepreneurs to choose Fort Worth when they could choose to be anywhere. You really could have an office in downtown Fort Worth, be 30 minutes from the airport, and then get to New York to your investors, or go to the West Coast, or go to London. And that's all made possible because of innovation. And aren't we fortunate that American Airlines, of course, is headquartered here in the city of Fort Worth? I enjoy a really great relationship with Robert Isom, their CEO, and their entire team that constantly are willing to innovate and focus. Their headquarters is in a phenomenal building. If you've never been there, it's pretty amazing. And they're fully invested here in Fort Worth and obviously to the region with this most recent announcement. So I think that for me would be number one.
Well, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I learned from you, Mayor Parker, that American Airlines started at Meacham Field. Is that right?
Isn't that wild? Yeah.
That's
Honestly, until we
crazy.
did the anniversary celebrations this last year for Meacham, I did not realize that. I know.
That's incredible. Yeah,
It all
and
comes full circles here in our city.
it does indeed. Yeah, this is definitely a big aviation town, whether you realize it or not. Mayor Parker, thank you so much for joining me today on Fort Worth Innovates. And if you like hearing stories like this about innovation, research, entrepreneurship, and startups in our city, please subscribe, share, and be sure to tell a friend. The more you engage, the more episodes we can bring to you. Fort Worth Innovates is produced by Kendall Rogers. And of course, we'd like to thank our sponsor for this podcast, the Fort Worth-Tarrant County Innovation Partnership, who are building an innovation district where technology and research combine to build the future, right here, right now.